Okay, so today we're going to be talking about how to say there is, there are, or there was, or there were in Spanish. And this is one of the coolest tricks to know because there is minimal need to think about conjugation. I love these sentences or these phrases where we can just throw words or throw our new knowledge into the middle of a sentence and it's gonna work out because it just does. And había, y hubo are three examples that work just like that. And that's what we're gonna go over today. So to discuss how do we say there is something, or there are something, or there were something, that's the context of today's video. So let's jump right into it. We're going to be working with the verb haber. Haber is such a versatile verb in Spanish that has so many different applications, but we're going to be looking at a pretty easy one today. Haber means to have. Now, maybe you're thinking that I already learned that tener means to have. Tener means to possess something. This have, haber, is more of the auxiliary or the grammatical version of having something. We have this in English as well. So, like the sentence, I have been here before. You can see how have is working on the rest of the verb to give it a specific context of time or place so we can fit exactly when something happened. I have been here before is a lot different in meaning than I was here before or we were here. We have been here before is different than we were here, right? Or she will have worked here for 3 years next month. That's a lot different than saying she worked here for 3 years next month. That doesn't even make sense. So we need this have, and it functions exactly the same in Spanish. This is not what the video is about today. I plan to make a lot more videos about the verb haber and how we can implement it in other ways to say really cool things in Spanish. But today, we're going to be using I había, and hubo, which communicate in this conjugation, communicates that there is something, there are some things, there was something, there were some things in the past, and then we're going to talk about events and how we use hubo for that. Let's jump right into pronunciation here. You probably heard me say it now. This is pronounced not hey. The first time I read it, I was like, hey? No, it's I. This one is había, había, and then hubo, silent H in Spanish at the beginning of a word. Okay, so this is I. All right, let's talk about it. Looking at this image here, the most naive and simple way to describe this image is to say, there is a man. This there is used here is I. I un hombre. As simple as that. Now, we can build upon this and say, there's a man in the street, which would be, hay un hombre en la calle. Hay un hombre en la calle. Pay attention to that pronunciation. You're not going to hear a native speaker or an advanced speaker say, hay un hombre. No, it's kind of smashed all together. Hay un hombre. Hay un hombre. And that's how you're going to hear it in conversation. What about there are cars? In the background, we can see there are cars. Now we know I is for there is a man, singular thing. So do we need to change I for plural things? No, we don't. To describe or to say that there are cars, it is just hay coches. Same exact word. How cool is that? We could say there are a lot of cars in the background. I'm going to let you try to translate this. Now, the background comes from, we use the word el fondo, and el fondo can mean the background of a photo. It could mean, in some contexts, it could mean like the scenery that we're talking about, maybe in a photograph or a painting. But it can also mean the bottom of something, like the bottom of a glass. Or I could say el fondo de la piscina, which is the bottom of the pool. But in this context, El fondo will work for the background of this photo. So let's say there are a lot of cars in the background. How would you say that? Hay muchos coches en el fondo. There are a lot of cars in the background. Hay muchos coches en el fondo. What about there's a group in the street? Group in Spanish is el grupo. Go ahead and try to translate this. Hay un grupo en la calle. Hay un grupo en la calle. What if we were to say there are two women in the group? We're saying there are. How would we translate this? Now, women in Spanish is, or woman is la mujer, but women is las mujeres. So how would we say two women? There are two women in the group. Hay dos mujeres en el grupo. Hay dos mujeres en el grupo. Now, había. We're going to move a little quicker now because había is used exactly the same way that we were using I, but this communicates the past imperfect tense. So this would be to describe that there was something that I observed, or there were some things that I observed. So let's take a look at it. Maybe this lady here is describing the man that she saw in the street to one of her coworkers, but it happened yesterday or earlier. And she wants to say, yesterday, there was a man in the street. Now, I'm not going to give you any help. I want you to translate this on your own. Ayer había un hombre en la calle. Did you use había? Había un hombre en la calle. Ayer is the Spanish word for yesterday. It works just like it does in English. We could have said in this sentence in English, there was a man in the street yesterday. We could have done that in Spanish as well. Había un hombre en la calle ayer. So wherever you feel comfortable putting it, sometimes conversational clues and context will make it feel right. But for now, we'll go with ayer había un hombre en la calle. What about there were a lot of cars in the street? There were a lot of cars in the street. Go ahead and pause. Think of a translation. Había muchos coches en la calle. Había muchos coches en la calle. There were a lot of cars in the street. Isn't that cool? Let's move on to hubo. Hubo is used exactly like había, except hubo describes a specific event. So when I say event, I want you to think of a concert, a wedding, a church service, or something like that. Hubo is a specific event that occurred in the past. There's some more nuance that can get complicated, but basically, this will function in over 90% of conversational uses of there was an event. So when you think of an event, I don't want you to say había, I want you to use hubo. Let's practice it. We're going to use the word an accident. An accident is an event that occurred. So this lady is telling her coworker there was an accident. Go ahead and translate that. Hubo un accidente. Hubo un accidente. You didn't say había, did you? No. An accident being an event. Hubo un accidente. What if we want to say a little bit longer of a sentence? Look at this. Pay close attention to what is an event or what is the thing that we observed. And go ahead and translate this sentence. Hubo un accidente, pero no había mucho tráfico. You see the difference here? Hubo un event. There was an event. No había mucho tráfico, but there was not a lot to observe, right? We could say it like that. I don't care if you got accidente correct. I don't care if you got pero correct. I just want to know that you understand hubo for an event and había for something that we observed that was not an event. Let's move on here just a little bit because that no había gives us a segue into making this negative. There is, there are, If we say no hay, that means there is not or there are not. You'll hear no hay all the time in this very common Spanish idiom, a response to when you say thank you, muchas gracias, you'll hear no hay problema, which literally means, quite literally, there is not a problem. There isn't a problem. Or just no problem. Don't worry about it. It was nothing. No hay problema. For había, which is there was or there were, no había is there wasn't or there weren't. Same thing for hubo, which is just like había, except we use it for events. So hubo, there was maybe an event, hubo un evento, or there was not an event. No hubo un evento. Now, if we want to ask a question, you can see in English this changes the order of there are or are there. And that's how we ask a question in English. We don't ask, there are a lot of cars on the street. No, that's weird. We say, are there a lot of cars on the street? And in Spanish, it's not this complicated. We use the same verb we've already been working with, but we change our inflection just a little bit. And if we're writing, don't forget our upside down question mark over here. So are there a lot of cars in the street? In Spanish would be, ¿hay muchos coches en la calle? ¿Hay muchos coches en la calle? See how I'm changing my inflection a little bit? And that's making it a question. What about, was there an event yesterday? I want you to translate this. Event is el evento. But in this context, we're just going to say un evento. So ask this question. Was there an event yesterday? I hope you used hubo. Hubo un evento ayer? Or we could move this ayer, this yesterday, to the beginning and say ayer hubo un evento. That sounds a little weird, but it works. So just to recap, is, there are in the present tense. Había, there was, there were in the past tense. Hubo, there was in the past an event. Let's move on to some practice. So I'm going to read the initial sentence. It may be in Spanish, it may be in English, and you need to translate, focusing on using the correct form of había, or hubo. Feel free to pause in between my reading of the sentence to give yourself some time to figure it out and get the right answer. You ready? Había dos hombres en el grupo ayer. Go ahead and translate this. There were two men in the group yesterday. I don't care if you got all this right, but did you recognize había is there were two men? There were. Good job. Let's try this one. There was a lot of traffic this morning because there was a concert yesterday. This one might be tricky. Pay attention to what is an observed occurrence, or pay attention to something that was observed in the past, and then an event that occurred. Also, if you don't know this morning, it's esta mañana. This is not esta mañana. This is esta mañana, which is how we literally say this morning. For tonight, we also in Spanish say this night, which would be esta noche. But right now, for this morning, use esta mañana. Concert is el concierto. So go ahead and plug those in, but pay attention to the correct form of haber. Which one are we using? Había mucho tráfico esta mañana porque hubo un concierto ayer. Did you correctly identify the concert was an event that occurred, and then the traffic was something that we observed? Two different things. Había and then hubo. Very good. Ayer no había coches en la calle, pero hoy hay mucho tráfico. This one's tricky. Yesterday, there were not cars on the street, but there is a lot of traffic today. And just one more time, I don't care if you got all of this translation correct, but I want you to correctly identify that this was the negative form of haber, no había, so there were not, and then there is or there are. All right. So now that you've learned the uses of había, and hubo, your homework is 3 tasks that I think are going to help you improve your skills in using these. The first one is one of my favorite ones, and it's to invent your own sentences. Think about things that you saw or things that you are currently seeing, maybe while you're driving or just thinking to yourself. Try to come up with your own ways to use these 3 conjugations of haber. These are going to help really ingrain them in your brain and have them at the tip of your tongue for your next conversation. Next, in a Spanish conversation, listen for these words. Maybe you can pull up a podcast in Spanish or watch news in Spanish. And I want you to ignore everything, but decide I'm going to listen for them to say the word I, and then try to piece together, see if you can figure it out. But get used to hearing había, and hubo in everyday Spanish conversation to help you pick up on the context there, because there's a lot packed into these words. And then the last one is go use había, and hubo in your own Spanish conversation. Maybe you're going somewhere to work or to church or to some event, and you know that you're going to be using Spanish. Pre-plan to use these phrases, or había. Maybe come up with a few sentences of your own that you learned in step 1 and figure out how can I squeeze or apply these words into this conversation. I promise you, you're going to be amazed with how well this information sticks in your head if you do these 3 things and you intentionally decide to use them in a conversation. Thank you so much for watching this video. I hope that it was helpful. Please give us a like. Give us some comments on how you think this could be better or something else, some other content you might like to see. And if you really are enjoying this kind of content, I plan to put it out as much as possible. So be sure to subscribe so that you don't miss our next video. Thanks so much for watching.